All right, let's just jump right in. Have you ever really thought about how the entire meaning of a single Bible verse, one that shaped theology for literally centuries, could completely flip based on where you put one little phrase? Well, that's exactly what we're looking at today with Revelation 13:8. It's this fascinating grammatical puzzle, but one with some really profound consequences.
So check this out. The verse can be read in two totally different ways. On one hand, you have this idea of a cosmic sacrifice, a lamb that was slain before the world even began. On the other hand, you have the idea that people's names were written in a book before creation. These are two wildly different concepts, and they both come from the exact same Greek words.
So, that's going to be our mission in this explainer. We're going to play linguistic detective, you and I. We're going to crack this code and figure out not only which reading is the more likely one, but also why this tiny little grammatical detail actually unlocks a much, much deeper understanding of the entire text.
Okay, so the heart of this whole mystery is a single Greek phrase, apo kataboles kosmo. It translates pretty straightforwardly to from the foundation of the world. The whole debate, everything just boils down to what this phrase is actually describing in the sentence.
So the first possibility, and you'll see this in older translations like the King James, is that the phrase is attached to the Lamb who was slain. Now, this paints an incredible picture, right? It suggests the crucifixion wasn't just a moment in time, but an eternal, timeless event that was woven into reality before history even started. It's a really powerful theological idea.
But then you have the other possibility, which, most modern translations lean towards, and that's that the phrase modifies the names being written. In this reading, the whole focus shifts. It's not about a sacrifice happening before time, it's about God's knowledge before time. This idea that the faithful were already known to God before a single star was in the sky.
To solve this, we can't just, pick the one that sounds cooler. We have to actually look at the evidence. So let's start with our first big clue, the grammar of the original Greek text itself.
Now, this might sound a little technical, but stick with me, it's actually really simple. Think about this sentence. I saw a man on a hill with a telescope. So who has the telescope? Is it me, or is it the man on the hill? See? The whole meaning changes depending on where you attach that little phrase, with a telescope. It's the exact same principle at work here in Revelation. So the logical question is, how does the New Testament usually use this phrase? Well, when you go and look at every other time it shows up, a really clear pattern emerges. This phrase, from the foundation of the world, is always, and I mean consistently, used to talk about God's plans or his divine election or his foreknowledge. It is never, not once, used to describe an act of slaughter.
And this verse, right here, just illustrates the point perfectly. 1 Peter makes this super sharp distinction. The Lamb was foreknown before the foundation of the world, but he was made manifest, meaning the crucifixion actually happened, in the last times, inside of human history. So the Bible itself seems to separate God's pretemporal knowledge from the actual historical event.
And the grammar gets even more specific, which is pretty cool. The Greek word for slain is in what's called the perfect tense. Now, all that means is that it's describing a past, completed action that has effects that is still going on right now. Think about the cross. It was a specific, datable moment in history, but its effects, its redemptive power, are still very much active today. It's not describing some kind of timeless, ongoing state. Okay, so the grammatical evidence is already pretty strong. But there is one more clue. That is, frankly, it's the smoking gun. And what's so fascinating is that the author of Revelation basically hid it in plain sight, just a few chapters later.
This is where our little investigation gets really good. See, if a writer uses a phrase that's a bit ambiguous, a great way to figure out what they meant is to find another spot where they used it clearly. And that is exactly what we have here.
And here it is, Revelation chapter 17, verse 8. The sentence structure is almost identical. It's talking about people whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world. But notice what's not there. There's no slain lamb. There's no ambiguity at all. The meaning is perfectly clear. And when you put them side by side like this, the author's intent just becomes crystal clear. In our ambiguous verse, the phrase could attach to slain. But here, in the clear parallel verse, it can only attach to the writing of the names. It's almost certain that the author meant the same thing in both places. That little phrase, who was slain, back in chapter 13, is just a descriptor. It's telling us whose book it is. It belongs to the Lamb who was, at a specific point in history, slain. So the grammar and the internal context, they're pointing one way pretty decisively.
But to really get a feel for this, we need to zoom out and look at the world this was written in. I mean, this idea of a book of life wasn't some brand new concept. It was part of a tradition that was already thousands of years old.
Yeah, this imagery has a really long history. It goes all the way back to the tablets of destiny in ancient Mesopotamia, where they believed the gods wrote down the fates of kings. Then the Old Testament writers pick up this metaphor for God's knowledge. And by the time we get to Revelation, it's this really well-established image for divine record-keeping.
And what's really fascinating is that even in its earliest forms, it wasn't necessarily about this rigid, unchangeable predestination. We actually have ancient texts where King Sennacherib of Assyria is praying to the gods to write a good destiny for him. That implies that what was written could be influenced. It was a metaphor for divine knowledge and the final outcome, not necessarily some script that was written in stone from eternity past.
And that brings us to the final, and maybe the most important piece of this whole puzzle. If the verse is really about names being written down before creation, what does that actually mean for us? What are the implications?
So here's the crucial point. The text clearly affirms God's total knowledge, what theologians call divine foreknowledge. From God's perspective outside of time, he has this complete, certain awareness of who his people are. Now that's different from what's called causal predestination, the idea that God actively caused or determined that outcome beforehand. The verse definitely supports the first idea, foreknowledge, but it doesn't necessarily require the second.
But this leads to a really interesting tension right inside the book of Revelation itself. Okay, so if the list is set from the foundation of the world, does that mean it's absolutely 100% unchangeable? Because look at this promise from just a few chapters earlier. Christ promises the one who conquers, the one who perseveres, that he will never blot their name out of the book. Well, the very idea of blotting something out implies that it's a possibility, right? The text seems to be holding two ideas at the same time: the eternal certainty of God's knowledge and the real human responsibility to endure.
And this is just the pastoral genius of the text. It's not really trying to solve a deep philosophical debate for us. It's offering encouragement. For believers who are facing intense persecution, the Book of Life is a promise. Your life might feel incredibly uncertain right now, but your identity in God is not. He has known you from the very beginning. It's meant to give assurance, while at the same time calling for perseverance.
So we end up right back where we started, but now with a much clearer picture. The Lamb wasn't slain before creation. Instead, the names of his followers were known before creation. The cross was a real, bloody, historical event that gives meaning to a book whose contents were known before history ever began. And it kind of leaves us with this question: how does peeling back all these layers of grammar and history do more than just solve a puzzle? How does it actually deepen our entire understanding of a text? It just goes to show you, sometimes the smallest details really do make all the difference.